Hello, this is Todd Lewis, your host of the Praise of Folly podcast. Here today, we have a special guest, Jim Kalb. He might be well known for his writings on Crisis Magazine and some of his works about liberalism and inclusiveness. Now, I guess I should start off with this question. When did you first realize that the liberal narrative wasn't entirely convincing anymore?
Well, it goes back quite a while, but the thing that sort of brought it to a head was when I went to law school. And it's been a while. I mean, that was 30 years ago or so. And I went to law school. There's all this stuff that everybody just had to believe. There just wasn't, the other didn't make a lot of sense, and it really didn't match up with all sorts of you take something like feminism as it's reflected in the law, that you have this artifice that tells you the sexes are exactly the same, and that it's just unimaginable and a great wrong that there should be any difference at all in how people think about them, or what they're expected to do, or what they can expect from each other. And that simply isn't how anybody's ever looked at things. It's really kind of a charade that it sort of applies in some situations and not others, and people try to have it both ways, and so it really didn't add up. But we're all sort of immersed in that. And so I just spent a lot of time since this thrown into it, trying to think through, how it comes about, what's wrong with it, how you get a grip on it, so you can think about and show that there's really a problem with it. Since if you're at one of our academic institutions, especially a law school, it seems absolutely invulnerable. So, that's what got me started on trying to get a real grip on it.
Yeah. The fact that nobody really actually lives like they believe it is kind of a problem. Now, as to the origins of liberalism as an ideology or a system of thought, I think a case could be made that the intellectual revolutions of the likes of Machiavelli, Hobbes, and Bacon all kind of created the preconditions, the sort of foundational beliefs of liberalism. Do you think that that's a valid assessment?
Yeah, that's it. There are some people like Richard Weaver goes back to the late Middle Ages and nominalism, and I tried to follow that at one point, but found that I simply didn't understand what those guys in the 14th century were saying well enough to really say. But if you get up to people like Bacon and Hobbes and Locke, you definitely get to the situation where you're giving up on the idea of knowledge as contemplating truth, and you're looking at how you can get a hold of the world and make use of it to achieve people's goals, which are assumed to be you kind of very basic material goals. Like in the case of Hobbes, it's mostly staying alive. And in the case of Bacon, it's inventing technology so that you can have more prosperity and have more control of the physical world. And in the case of Locke, it's really increasing your property so that you can prosper and live a materially more comfortable existence. So there really was that change of orientation from what had come before that I think leads to liberalism. Since it becomes all a matter of trying to achieve these very basic material goals, and look upon people as a bunch of individuals, each of whom is pursuing them. You get into the contractual theory of politics, that the social contract, like you find in Hobbes and in Locke, and politics becomes a matter of will, and how do you reconcile the will? Everybody wants to give his own will as much play as possible. And if you pursue that, you come up with liberalism.
Yeah, yeah. The idea that, as Machiavelli said, we don't think about the abstract ideal political systems, but the actually existing political systems. Now, you had mentioned elsewhere that liberalism and the scientific process are intimately tied together. Maybe you could explain that a little bit.
Well, it's yeah, I guess it's complicated because science is a complicated business. On one side, people are trying to find out the truth of things. So to that extent, it's contemplative. But on the other side, people are, as in Bacon, who's the great ideologist of this other side of science. They're sort of demystifying nature, putting it to the question, as he says, so that you can manipulate it and do things with it and make it do what you want. And that tied into other developments like Descartes, who said, well, nature is really completely mathematical and it's completely mechanistic. And so therefore it's devoid of meaning. That's one aspect of Descartes' famous distinction between mind and body, this absolute split between feelings, ideals, thought, and the physical world. It's hard to see how they could be connected at all. So that that side, the sort of ideological side of science, where you have this completely demystified world that has no given meaning, but is simply resources for technological manipulation, ties into political liberalism very much, because liberalism is the political theory for a bunch of individuals who think of themselves or are thought of by the theoretician as simply pursuing their own basically material goals. At least that's how it started off. Later on, like in the present day, that sort of developed also pursuing goals of equal status and equal respect and admiration and so on. But that's how it started off, this emphasis on a man as something that cares, that are sort of equal in all men. And then the only possible point of politics or social life of morality is to come to some sort of agreement among people so they can have this collective or system for pursuing their desires and staying out of each other's way as much as possible.
Yeah, the this idea of demystifying nature and arguing that this talk of a substantive good is meaningless. In many ways, C.S. Lewis in The Abolition of Man picks up on that. And I think he argues that liberalism of the West, fascism is in Germany, and communism is in Russia, all shared this basic assumption. And we're all moving in largely the same direction. And that they had given up on the idea that the good was substantive.
Yeah, it's a matter of the triumph of the will. In Germany, they said the triumph of the will. A modern liberal would be more likely to say, well, maximum preference satisfaction if he inclines toward economics, or giving equal free rein to people's life plans if he wants to sound a bit more idealistic and Rawlsian perhaps. There is no substantive good. There's just people trying to get things they just happen to want. And how do you deal with that situation? That's the basic background theory of liberalism.
Yeah. In replacing the view of a substantive good, liberalism, as do these other ideologies, in some sense has to create its own counterfeit substantive good, because people cannot live in the vacuum of no substantive good. So even if they can't admit to having one, they sort of have to pretend they have one.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one of the basic objections to liberalism, as I see it. There's always a substantive good. The society always has something that it's either religious based or something that functions as such. A highest good, theory of the nature of man, what life is all about, a theory of that, because otherwise you can't resolve conflicts. And so with liberalism, if you try to keep it as much as possible in line with this idea that, well, really they're just people and their desires, then the substantive good becomes equal desire satisfaction. That becomes a substantive good. The highest good in life is everybody getting what they want. And then if you want to moralize that, you say that, well, everybody equally desires things. So therefore, if you want to be social and moral, then we have to make sure that they all get what they want equally, and you don't have a discrimination among various desires. And as liberalism has developed, it's taken different forms. At first it was, sort of free trade, getting rid of monopolies so everybody could participate in the market equally. There weren't any barriers to market entry and to going into business. And then you got into redistribution approaches because some people were just a lot more successful than others. And so you'd really maximize equal preference and satisfaction by taking some stuff from the rich and giving it to the poor. And then now we've sort of raised it to a whole different level since somebody noticed, well, that actually people really aren't satisfied with material benefits. They also want things like social status and to be well thought of. And so we have to divide that up equally too, which gets into really tyrannical territory, since it means that in the name of equal freedom being being able to get what you want, you're going to have to totally control what everybody thinks about everything. Because otherwise, some people are going to get discriminated against, and then their equal freedom will be stepped on, and that's against the whole theory of what society should be like. So,
well, yeah.
My methodological development, and the outcome is insane.
Well, yes, I would agree that the outcome is insane, but there's a couple of innate problems with making individual value judgments a substantive good. Is number one, there are values that are mutually exclusive. If my value for traditional Christian values is maximized, then the homosexual's values are minimized, and vice versa. And the second problem is, as Aristotle pointed out, desires are infinite in scope. And that's why he argued that you should educate people to rationally control desires. Because since desires are unlimited, there's no possible way one could satisfy all of them. And that means that there's no possible way you could found a society on that system, because it would tear itself apart.
You're right. That's an important one. That after all, desires conflict and they aren't really consistent in basic principle. And so, the way it works out, and it's hard to see how else it could, is that you say, well, the desires that involve interfering with other people's desires, whereas the desires that don't interfere with other people much at all are okay. And so, there's legitimate and illegitimate desires. And so that something like trying to make money's okay, so long as you stay within the limits of the law with regard to market transactions, and also as it's developed, you if you make a lot of money, you give some of it to poor people through the welfare system, and private hobbies, and private indulgences are okay, so that if you like to do various collect stamps or engage in various erotic practices, then that's okay, because you can do it by yourself or with small numbers of people who are consenting, and so therefore that doesn't interfere with other people. Whereas if you try to support a family system, which recognizes enduring connections that have a natural function, like marriage between a man and a woman, and give it some kind of special status, and that's illegitimate, because that tells people of a different life plan that their life plan isn't as good. It establishes a scheme of interfering with things that's different from the liberal scheme. The liberal scheme really allows only two types of institution: market-based institutions, and institutions which are neutral bureaucracies that regulate the market and regulate people so that they don't step on each other's toes. It really doesn't allow any other kind of authoritative institutions like the family.
Well,
or like organized religious expectations. Those you have to keep under your hat. And in the long run, they really have to be uprooted, because they'll sneak out somehow. And so in order to establish this regime of equal freedom, you got to get rid of them.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that the kind of moral anarchy of denying substantive goods leads to a kind of tyranny, and then you also mentioned that certain erotic behaviors are acceptable in a liberal society. And I find it interesting that in the introduction of Brave New World, Huxley argues that political and economic freedom are inversely proportional. Well, the more economic and political freedom you have, the less sexual freedom you have, and vice versa. So it seems that the tyranny of the vacuum is in part being enforced by these choices that people make that are allowed, that actually support the tyranny.
Oh yeah, I should have mentioned that, actually. I said that, well, in order to decide, which these desires, like the gay liberationist desire to do that, or the traditionalist Christian desire to have a family system that's got some status so that people can rely on it. Which one of those is allowed depends on which one creates institutions that aren't liberal institutions. And I describe that as a case in which, if it creates a liberal institution, that means it steps on other people's toes and enforces them to do things, because it's an institution after all. But the other side of it is that in order to have a good system of control, that is to establish liberal institutions as the dominant ones, to maintain that, it's very helpful to get rid of all other institutions. All serious social life has to go through either market transactions or else bureaucratic relationships, because the family's been abolished as a reliable thing, because there can't be any settled expectations as to what it means. Religion's been abolished as a social institution, because some people might think it's good, some might think it's bad, and even if the great majority think it's good, well, you gotta prevent the tyranny of the majority from established institutions which are other than liberal institutions. So that getting rid of all settled institutions other than liberal institutions fits in with of keeping people from stepping on each other's toes, and also supports power, like the practical governing power of liberal institutions, because they're the only ones that can be relied on to function.
Yeah. One institution in particular that it's not necessarily classically defined as an institution, but the idea of an independent male fraternity, which we see in the classical world, which we saw in the Middle Ages, and we saw in the Victorian era reaching kind of an apogee. But by attacking masculine spaces, masculine fraternities, these anti-liberal forces that could threaten to bring down liberalism are effectively neutered. I mean, Aristotle argued that politics was essentially the love of free men souls. Free men loved each other's souls, and they created a political institution to teach virtue. And of course, that's a very dangerous thing to do in a liberal society.
Yeah, because it suggests there could be something that has authority and is effective outside bureaucracy and the market, and that's really threatening. And the theory of why it shouldn't be is that, well, if you have something outside bureaucracy in the market, then it won't be rational and it won't treat everybody's desires in this equal way. That's the theoretical side. And the practical side, the political side, if there's something like that, then it can't be controlled. The family can't be controlled. If the classical tyrants, they didn't like friendships among men. They didn't like distinguished men. There's a famous story of I think one tyrant sent to another for advice as to how to rule the city in which he had just become the tyrant, and the second tyrant told the messenger to report what he was doing, and what he did was he walked around in a field and cut off the heads of the weeds that were growing higher than the other weeds, and the other guy got the point. You have to abolish ties among people, that are strong, that are based on disinterested principles, because then those give rise to some power outside market and bureaucracy, and that's intolerable.
Yeah. As far as the pretending to deny is substantive good, William T. Kavanaugh's 2006 article, "The Empire of the Empty Shrine: American Imperialism in the Church," I think was one of those moments where I realized that there isn't this neutral space. It's actually something there. They pretend that it's empty, and through smoke and mirrors, they trick people into believing that it is. But when you actually look inside the temple, there's something there, and it's called freedom.
Yeah, it's called freedom, and that's supposed to be the highest ideal. And what is it? It's everybody getting as much as possible what he happens to want equally. But then that turns out to be something that can only give you things that people generally don't care all that deeply about. If they're good, normal people, because it can only be individual indulgence or individual. It can't have a social aspect except supporting the system. That's the only social aspect you're allowed to participate in. So anyway, there is this highest good, and except they pretend that it's not there, so it never gets discussed, and that makes it invulnerable, because if you can't discuss it, if you say, well, look, I mean, we're not enforcing any kind of good that could be disputed on everybody and making everybody live that way. We're just protecting everybody's ability to live his own life as he chooses. So you never discuss it, so it adds to the stability of the system, that you have this screen that seems invulnerable. That's the actual issues from ever getting on the table.
Oh, exactly. One of the uh, reasons the liberal state gives for its own existence is that it resolves violent disputes. It goes back to the age of religion, the wars of religion, and how the secular liberal state comes in and is the peacemaker. And they argue that they're the peacemakers. But beginning with, say, the American Revolution, the liberal system itself only took power through a great deal of violence, on par with the religious violence that they were trying to stop.
Oh, yeah, it's unavoidable. There's always an established religion. And the liberal established religion, they attempt to put it outside the realm of discussion by making it unbelievably stupid. So it seems there's nothing there. It's there. And, it's impossible to discuss. And in the long run, that makes it more of a threat to a tolerable way of life, to the ability to tolerate differences, because it's unlimited in its demands in the long run. That's when an expression like microaggression or safe space shows. It shows that the demands of the system becoming unlimited, because any deviance at all is,
well, yeah, it isn't limited, because once my preferences cannot be offended, well, then what kind of power does it take to prevent others from offending my beliefs? Well, and ultimately absolute power. But you made an interesting point in your interview with Tom Woods. Now, you're arguing that the liberal system as we have it today, the market force, is an indispensable element of it. And many libertarians, like Mr. Woods, would want to argue that modern day liberalism is opposed to market forces. So maybe exploring that a little bit might be interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because it did seem that progressive thought, which starts in liberalism, is trying to evolve into a system in which everything was bureaucratically controlled, because that would be more rational, because then you could be really sure that everybody was treated equally and got equal ability to satisfy his desires. But that just turned out not to work. So we're in this, we seem to have settled into this permanent state or end state of liberalism, in which it's recognized that you have both. You have the market, because not everything can be planned, and planned economies don't really work, and they end up violating all sorts of preferences. For example, by overproducing one thing that people don't want and underproducing something else that people do want. And then the struggle is to introduce as much bureaucratic control into it as possible. This seems to be the tendency of liberalism, without killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. So that you have like welfare programs, which to some degree equalize wealth, or make it more equal than it would be otherwise. And then you have these programs to redistribute social status. So you have affirmative action, and then that's really taken off in the past, I don't know, 20 years or so. With political correctness and the expansion of what constitutes discrimination. You're harassing somebody, and you're subject to all sorts of penalties. If he claims to be a man, even though he's a woman, and so that and it's not obvious that really interferes with market efficiency that much. Businesses don't mind it. It doesn't cost them much. Big companies, Target, really proud of itself for having trans bathrooms or whatever the situation is called. So that anyway, that's where they are. I mean, libertarians are right to the extent that it looked like liberalism was moving away from market reliance, but that turned out not to work. So you have this sort of permanent mixed society with constant reshuffling going on as to what the mixture is.
Do you think that if we hadn't had this progressive interim, that modern day, that classical liberalism would have still turned out the way liberalism is now, even without that progressive intermediate phase?
Yeah, because I think so, because again, there has to be a religion and like a basic understanding of what the good life is. And libertarianism is just too procedural. They say, well, we want to have a way of resolving disputes, and so therefore let's define property rights, and then disputes are resolved without any arbitrary interference because everybody has a property right to everything, and then they just engage in transactions, so you don't have to have anybody forcing his will on anybody else. But why are property rights so sacred, and why is that a uniquely good way to resolve disputes when the background understanding is that people should just be able to do what they want to do? Why wouldn't it increase the overall you want to do if you take a little bit from the rich and give it to the poor? Because Bill Gates, I don't know what it is, 60 billion or 80 billion. You wouldn't miss it if somebody took $100 from him and gave it to somebody who didn't have anything. So it wouldn't affect his, but it would affect the effective freedom of the guy with no money who got it. So I just don't think that, given the background understanding of the point of human life, that the libertarian, classical liberalism as construed by the libertarians was really stable. There was a development. I mean, at first with Hobbes, the big worry was, well, will I stay alive? So let's just have some guy who's an absolute monarch, so he'll hold everybody in awe and keep us from killing each other. And then that developed until Locke said, well, we do have general social peace, so why don't we improve the situation from the standpoint of people getting what they want and let them accumulate money? So let's have free markets. But why should it stop there? Why shouldn't you, given the background understanding of what's good, getting what you want, why shouldn't they find some more sophisticated way of maximizing that? So I just don't think it was stable.
Well, as far as the logic of liberalism, that there does seem to be that element that, well, why just stop with, private property and free markets? Why not? I mean, because as you said, Bill Gates won't miss $100, but some guy, living on the street could really enjoy that. I don't know if you follow Ed Feser, the philosopher, but he wrote something very good about this hyper neutrality. He basically argues that it's kind of a facade, because the minute you press the libertarian on what they mean by this hyper neutrality, it develops either right wing or left wing flavors depending on the individual libertarian. So the minute you start to press for a definition, they cease to be neutral and they become either right or left wing.
Yeah, that's part of the general problem, that there's always the highest good. There's always an answer to the question, what is the nature of man? What is man's highest good? Because you need that in order to resolve conflicts. And so that, yeah, I think I didn't read him on that. I know that I think he was a libertarian at one point, and
He was.
yeah, so I'm sure he's thought through the issues. He thinks through issues quite effectively, so I'm sure he's thought through those issues.
Yeah, I found his critique of libertarianism fairly compelling, but you talked about liberalism valuing individual preferences. It seems to me that anarchism and libertarianism are really kind of the hyper ultimate endgame of liberalism, where they take personal preferences to the logical extreme.
Yeah, they try to, they try to, but yeah, I think they'll always be very much a minority, a small minority view, because they just don't answer all sorts of questions. Like anarchism, there's obvious problems with how you keep the mafia or whoever from abusing you. The basic reason protection of life, life, bodily integrity, and like your rights, whatever they are in the system, to material goods. There's got to be some organized way of doing that, and once you have that, you have a government, because it's going to have the ability to use force, and so anarchism disappears. So it's not practical, and libertarianism, as I said, that it's a nice, clear view of things that has an instant answer to everything. It seems to appeal to computer programmers and people who like clear logical systems that can enable you to sort through things very quickly. But nobody cares about it that much, because what they care about is their background understanding of what man is like and what his supreme good is. And that's just going to trump some particular some particular way that's institutionalized, if it seems you can do better.
Well, yeah, one of the things, one of the central tenets of liberalism is human rights. But very seldom do they ever actually give an account of human rights. Why should we believe that there are human rights at all? On the liberal account, they really don't give you, I don't think, very good reasons to believe there are human rights.
Yeah, that's a basic problem with I tend to call it the tendency of modern thought. Because you have some extremely brilliant people like Immanuel Kant, who has an account of that's really extremely interesting. You have to be a genius, which he was, to come up with it. And it's a liberal account, although it's like a different sort of liberalism from you're somewhat different from what we're talking about. It really does have more intellectual structure. But he says, well, suppose somebody should ask why anybody should act morally, as I am defining morally. And his response is, well, gee, maybe nobody's ever acted morally in the history of the world. That could be true, but he's not concerned with that. Where you're going to get this respect for the moral law when it's supposed to, when desires are simply desires and they're amoral. He simply doesn't answer it, and that's a problem. You start with the idea that you have desanctified world that means nothing. It's just stuff that you can use. And then you have people who have no, in the theory, explicit theory, who have no natural goals, but simply want stuff. And, then you could say, well, obviously the moral thing is that everybody should get his desires satisfied as much and as equally as possible, because they're all equally desires, and there's no reason to choose one guy's desires over another's, so you got to give it all to him equally. But, why is that a motive for any particular guy? There's no good answer in like the explanation of what a human being is that answers that. So yeah, that's another problem, and that's one reason liberals get so abusive when they deal with people who have different fundamental views than they do, because their idea really is that if you don't agree with us, then you must be a Nazi, because that's the only other thing that's possible. And there's no real argument why you shouldn't be a Nazi, except that's horrible. And so therefore, if you disagree with us, you're just this monster that we won't even look at or talk to. And that simply has to be gotten rid of. If you disagree with them fundamentally, it's outside the realm of discussion, because they don't have fundamental reasons why people should act well.
Well, exactly. In what ways have the traditionalists failed to combat liberalism?
Okay, all sorts of ways. Part of it, from my standpoint, like you got to develop the theoretical aspect in a more powerful way, like we've been talking about. Because traditionalists tend to be people with attachments. They tend to be people who say, well, look, it's just obvious. I mean, it's obvious that men aren't the same as women, and that if a guy decides he's a woman, that doesn't make him one, and that marriage hangs together if you view it as this thing that's rooted in nature and it's this natural function that's necessary to the propagation of the human species. But if you divorce it from that, it's just going to become insubstantial and impossible to define. So that there haven't been very good at coming up with answers to liberal objections, which are based on the idea that, really there's no meaning in things, and therefore there's just people want to get what you want, because it's, it's an argument, there's too little common ground. But in order to get by that, it seems to me that you have to raise this issue that we touched on, that, well, really there's always a view of the nature of man, and there's always a view of the highest good, and you claim you don't have one, and that so therefore you just want to let people live their own lives in their own ways. But actually that obviously can't be the case, because that gives you no way to resolve conflicts. Using people who don't go along your way of conflicts is not an answer. You have to develop that more theoretical aspect. Not that persuade your college roommate or some guy you run into a bar who's a liberal, or some guy you have an online chat with.
We almost need another Aristotle to lay the groundwork for conservative values again.
Yeah, but you really have to have a theoretical basis. And it seems to me that those who do have that, a lot of times it's overly academic, the presentation. You talk about like Aquinas or Aristotle, and all that's fine. but what you need actually, I suppose a good example of somebody who does what I'm saying you need to do is G.K. Chesterton, because he was able to take all sorts of things at odds with modern liberal understandings and put them in sort of vivid, everyday, commonsensical vernacular presentation.
C.S. Lewis had that gift too.
Yeah, he did. I think you mentioned the abolition of man.
Yeah.
So, we need more people like that. I don't know how you go about getting them, but if you become aware that that sort of thing is needed, then more people.
If only the demand would be supplied by the market, but it's not that easy.
It's not that easy. Yeah. If you have a conscious need, then if people are looking for something, then and there's an audience for it, then it develops. It's more likely to develop. So I think that's one problem. I guess the second, again, some of this goes back to the lack of theoretical power that's able to grasp these very basic questions about theory and also put it in a vernacular way. Is that if you have a hard time explaining your own opinions to yourself, then you're not going to be able to stand up for them very strongly. And if you're immersed in the situation in which everything you hear and everything you're told in school and what all the admired authorities say is, well, everybody should be able to live his own life in his own way. So therefore, liberalism is the only conceivable, non-abusive way to go about things. And people who disagree are monsters. If you're surrounded by all that, and you don't have a way of explaining why that's wrong, then you're not going to be able to give very good witness. So that we not only need a mob of G.K. Chestertons and C.S. Lewis's, but like I say, people conscious of the fact that you need that.
Yeah,
you gotta apply it to the present, and that you won't stay steady. It'll be hard for you to stay steady unless you can respond at the level at which you're being challenged.
Well, one successful, I think, response to this problem is the one that William Lane Craig uses. He's sort of created a sort of grassroots apologetics base so that Christian young people can give an account of their faith against their professors and peers. And it seems to be a successful way to get out to the grassroots so the man in the street is able to give an account for his position. And maybe we could apply that, take it outside the realm of apologetics and bring it into the realm of politics and economics.
Politics, economics, this idea that, it all depends on what human life is like, what man is, and everybody has a view of this, and how come we're all assuming that, it's all based on man is somebody who just want to get what he wants, and the world is just stuff that's to be used for that purpose. You somehow extend it, like as you say, from apologetics to a more comprehensive way of dealing with the world. So I guess that's the theoretical side, and then there's the other side that you just got to live better practically.